Google is losing market share, which kind of seems about right. When you take a really good product and then make it increasingly worse for the sole purpose of making more money to pay out your shareholders and yourself, then it stands to reason that people would start to find alternatives. And it looks like in the past couple of years, that's exactly what's been happening. Search Engine Land reports this: Google's share of the global search engine market fell below 90% for the first time since 2015, according to StatCounter. Google's global search market share was under 90% during each of the final 3 months of 2024. Here's a screenshot of the 2024 search market share showing Google dipping below 90% to 89.34 on October, 89.99 in November, that was awfully close, and 89.73 in December. And I realize that that's not much. It's really just a few percent, but what it represents is the first meaningful drop in search market share that Google has had in a long time. It's not significant because going from 89.1% to 89.9% is big in any way, but it's significant because of what it signifies. And here what it's signifying is Google's search dominance potentially ending. And that has a lot of potential implications. The article goes on, why we care. As the old saying goes, one's a dot, two's a line, and three's a trend. Clearly, what we're seeing here is Google losing market share. And if we're interested in seeing who Google is losing market share to, surprisingly, the answer appears to be Bing. If you look at Bing's market share, it's been steadily rising and is now kind of almost getting above 4%. Specifically, if you look at desktop search engine market share, where Bing has gone up pretty significantly, gaining basically a whole percent in the past 16 or 18 months. I realize Bing gets memed on all the time, but it's gaining real market share as people are seeking out alternatives to the increasingly bloated and AI slop-filled search engine that Google has become. And I think one of the most interesting things is when we look here, desktop search engine market share worldwide, and we'll just take away everything except Google, you can see that Google has gone from about 80%, 80.4% to 79.35%. They're dropping to below 80% in desktop market share, with Bing, like we just talked about a second ago, slowly rising in market share, breaking 12.21% just this last March. And probably a lot of this has to do with Copilot. If you use a Windows computer, then you have an icon on your computer that if you click it, pulls up something that looks a bit like this, except generally it works. But the idea is that this kind of integrates seamlessly into your OS, and you can pull up Copilot and type in whatever questions you want, and it'll direct you to Bing to answer those questions. But I think overall, people are moving away from Google for two big reasons. The first is a push, and the second is a pull. And I realize that's a little confusing, so let me explain what I mean by that. People are being pushed away from Google by Google themselves because of two big things: privacy violations and just poor user experiences. People, I think, generally understand that when they're using a free thing, they know that they are the product, and they're growing wise to the amount of data that's being collected by these companies, i.e. specifically Google. They don't like the idea that their data is being mined and sold to companies all around the world, and so they decide to do something about it and try something else. In this case, Bing. And they especially want to try something else when the Google experience has just become a terrible experience. If you've ever tried to find a recipe or answer a simple question, then you know that the experience that is searching things on Google is really quite bad. I wrote, the Google search experience sucks now, and the Google AI, ironically enough, summarized this. Many users feel that Google search has declined in quality, with some finding it less useful and more frustrating to use than before. The introduction of AI features like overviews and generative search, while intended to improve the experience, has been criticized for making search results less relevant and more difficult to navigate. Some users point to the increasing number of ads and the prominence of paid search results as contributing to a negative user experience, which absolutely makes sense. Kind of anything you type in, you've got the Google AI overview first, and you've got between 2 and 5 ads, and then you've sometimes even after that you've got one of these little people are also asking, and then you get to the real search results. This is halfway down the page. It's no secret that Google's going downhill, but there really haven't been any alternatives until very recently. Think if you didn't like Elon Musk, then you kind of still had no choice but to buy a Tesla if you were specifically going to get an electric car. Because aside from Tesla, up until pretty recently, there weren't any other alternatives. If you wanted a good electric car, you had to get a Tesla. Similarly, if you wanted a functional search engine, you pretty much had to use Google. There wasn't anything else that's algorithms were nearly as good. But when you take every issue that people have with Google search and start adding this AI slop on top of it that is often inaccurate, then people just kind of get sick of this. And Drew Gooden talked about this in his video technology isn't fun anymore, where he basically laments about how cool technology felt as it was coming out between 10 and 20 years ago. You would have all sorts of new exciting products that all looked vastly different from each other. And now it feels like every little thing is designed and optimized specifically to get your attention for a longer amount of time so that the companies involved can make more ad dollars off of you. I remember Google being a really fun learning engine where anytime I wanted to learn about something, I would just Google it and I could find blogs or people or experiences or forums or what have you that would teach me about interesting things. Now, for most of that, I just kind of go to Reddit. With the search feature being bogged down with AI slop, SEO, paid ads everywhere, it's just not fun anymore. It feels like it's a chore to navigate. And this encourages people to try something new, which leads us to an interesting happening in the browser search engine world. And that's that you find out that pretty much every browser now is actually pretty good. Even Bing, which I played around with a little bit while writing this video, it's actually not bad. It brings up all the results you would want in the same way that Google does. I wouldn't say it's better per se, but it's definitely comparable. Now, I said there was a push factor and a pull factor. Google, through all of their updates and optimization of everything, is pushing people away from their platform. And the pull factor is other people on other platforms building cool things that's pulling users over away from Google to whatever their thing is. Specifically, these come in the form of AI search engines like ChatGPT or Perplexity AI, and then also video search engines like TikTok. And DigiDay talks about this here. Google's market share decrease belies a big change in the way that users search for information online. Today's consumers use a wider variety of search tools than they did in previous years, from TikTok to Perplexity to Amazon, depending on their search goals. Research published by Omnicom in January, Omnicom is one of the largest advertisers in the world, suggested clients accordingly consider investing in their search across a more diverse set of channels. How people choose to get information is kind of being revolutionized, and Google is failing to keep up with that. They're trying to with their AI overview thing, but that's not the way people want to experience information. People want to see TikTok videos from someone they trust talking about the thing that they're searching for, or they want to type it into a box and have an AI pull it from the internet and present it to them in a way that they want. Not necessarily what Google is doing with their AI overview, but like a ChatGPT where you ask it a question and it presents the information in a way that's easy to digest. They want the information they're seeking out to feel personalized to them, not like some AI overview that just offers generic answers about stuff. Before we move on, if you enjoy this kind of video, I try to post between 1 and 2 times per week, and I'd love a subscription. So with people being pushed away from Google because of Google themselves and being pulled towards other platforms by those platforms offering solutions to the problems people had with Google itself is actually in a pretty bad spot right now. Not only are they losing market share, but they're also losing advertising share. In fact, it slipped below 50% of the total internet's ads market for the first time in 10 years. Business Insider talks a little more about this. Google's share of the search ad market could drop below 50% for the first time in a decade as AI search engines boom. Google is facing a challenge in its decades-long dominance of the internet's advertising market as AI, the new kid on the block, changes everything. Projections by eMarketer, a digital marketing research company owned by Business Insider parent Axel Springer, says that Google's share of the US advertising market could drop below 50% next year for the first time in more than a decade. Google has committed the classic blunder that they were on top and just kind of, for some reason, assumed that they could stay on top without continuing to innovate the stuff that people loved and got them to the top in the first place. We've seen this with Intel, Nokia phones, Blockbuster, and countless other companies. They beat the competition by building something really cool and interesting and new, but then instead of taking the money that they're earning to continue to innovate and make things better, they use it to pay out their executives or make their stock price go up through buybacks or just some other way of enriching themselves and putting the future of the company on the back burner. And when you do this, eventually someone comes along that's able to beat you at your own game, and they won't let you buy them out because they believe in a bigger vision. And that is essentially what is happening with Google here. But it actually gets even worse than that. This article came out while I was filming this. Alphabet shares sink 8% after Apple's Q says AI will replace search engines. And we go down a little bit. Alphabet and Apple shares sank Wednesday after Eddie Q, Apple's chief services officer, said that he believes that AI search engines will eventually replace standard search engines, such as Google, according to Bloomberg. Q says he expects to add artificial intelligence services from OpenAI, Perplexity, and Anthropic as search options from Apple's Safari browser in the future, according to the report. So not only are the customers moving away from Google because other people seem to have better options options for them and, present the information in a way that's not like paid ads or SEO or just like generic slop that they're not interested in. But it also looks like Apple is moving towards AI, which means they're moving away from Google. And Apple owning Safari and putting Google on Safari by default is one of the biggest reasons that Google has such a powerful monopoly. People essentially just use defaults. So if Google is the default on iPhones, then people are just going to use that. But if you switch the default to an AI search of some kind instead of Google, then Google loses an absolutely massive market, as people use not Google, but whatever Apple chooses to use instead. And I'm not often one to like celebrate when companies have a downfall of some kind, because I understand there are real people behind these companies that will lose their jobs when things like this happen. But Google, for a while now, has been abusing their monopoly power. I work in marketing and advertising, and Google's prices for their advertising are just absolutely insane. And there was kind of, up until very recently, nothing we could do about it because Google could charge whatever they wanted. And if we wanted to be on Google, we had to pay that. And there were no customers anywhere else. But this new competition will help. And I think it actually is helping a little bit already. I've been leaning a lot more into Bing recently because Google prices are basically just too high for it to always be profitable anymore. And this competition is going to force innovation. Either Google starts making things better to keep users, or it slowly goes the way of other companies like Sears and Kmart by being stuck in the past and ultimately passed up by someone else who's cooler and does things better, even if that person is Bing. Now, this is not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen this year, next year, probably not even the year after that. But over the next 5 to 10 years, it'll be really interesting to see how Google chooses to pivot to try and reverse this trend that we're seeing. Thanks for watching.